Chapter 33. With the morning came full consciousness. I realized bitterly all that had happened, but I was no longer inclined to bemoan my fate. My senses were stricken, as it seemed, too numb and rigid for any further outbreak of passion. A hard callousness took the place of outraged feeling, and though despair was in my heart, my mind was made up to one stern resolve. I would look upon Sybil no more. Never again should that fair face, the deceitful mask of false nature, tempt my sight and move me to pity or forgiveness. That I determined. Leaving the room in which I had passed the night, I went to my study and wrote the following letter. Sybil, after the degrading and disgraceful scene of last night, you must be aware that any further intercourse between us is impossible. Prince Romanez and I are leaving for London, and we shall not return. You can continue to reside at Willowsmere. The house is yours, and the half of my fortune, unconditionally settled upon you on our marriage day, will enable you to keep up the fashion of your set, and live with that luxury and extravagance you deem necessary to an aristocratic position. I have decided to travel, and I intend to make such arrangements as may prevent, if possible, our ever meeting again. Though I shall of course do my best for my own sake to avoid any scandal, to reproach you for your conduct would be useless. You are lost to all sense of shame. You have abased yourself in the humiliation of a guilty passion before a man who despises you, who, in his own loyal and noble nature, hates you for your infidelity and hypocrisy, and I can find no pardon for the wrong you have thus done to me, and the injury you have brought upon my name. I leave you to the judgment of your own conscience, if you have one, which is doubtful. Such women as you are seldom troubled with remorse. It is not likely you will ever see me or the man to whom you have offered your undesired love again. Make of your life what you can or will. I am indifferent to your movements, and for my own part shall endeavor as much as I may be to forget you exist. Your husband, Geoffrey Tempest. This letter, folded and sealed, I sent to my wife in her own apartments by her maid. The girl came back and said that she had delivered it, but that there was no answer. Her ladyship had a severe headache and meant to keep to her room that morning. I expressed just as much civil regret as a confidential maid would naturally expect from the newly wedded husband of her mistress, and then, giving instructions to my man Morris to pack my portmanteau, I partook of a hurried breakfast with Lucio in more or less silence and constraint, for the servants were in attendance, and I did not wish them to suspect that anything was wrong. For their benefit, I gave out that my friend and I were called suddenly to town on urgent business, that we might be absent a couple of days, perhaps longer, and that any special message or telegram could be sent on to me at Arthur's Club. I was thankful when we at last got away, when the tall, picturesque red gables of Willowsmere vanished from my sight, and when, finally, seated in a railway smoking carriage reserved for our two selves, we were able to watch the miles of distance gradually extend between us and the beautiful autumnal woods of the poet-haunted Warwickshire. For a long time we kept silence, turning over and pretending to read the morning's papers, till presently, flinging down the dull and wearisome Times sheet, I sighed heavily and leaned back and closed my eyes. "I am very truly much distressed about all this," said Lucio then, with extreme gentleness and suavity. "It seems to me that I am the adverse element in the affair. If Lady Sybil had never seen me—" "Why, then I should have never seen her," I responded bitterly. "It was as though it was through you I met her first." "True," and he eyed me thoughtfully. "I am very unfortunately placed. It is almost as if I were to blame, though no one could be more innocent or well-intentioned than myself." He smiled, then went on very gravely. "I should really avoid scandalous gossip if I were you. I do not speak of my own involuntary share in this disaster. What people say of me is quite immaterial, but for the lady's sake—" "For my own sake I shall try to avoid it," I said brusquely, whereat his eyes glittered strangely. "It is myself I have to consider most of all. I shall, as hinted to you this morning, travel for a few years." "Yes, go on a tiger-hunting expedition in India," he suggested, "or kill elephants in Africa. It is what a great many men do when their wives forget themselves. Several well-known husbands are abroad just now." Again the brilliant enigmatic smile flashed over his face, but I could not smile in answer. I stared moodily out the window at the bare autumnal fields, past which the train flew, bare of harvest, stripped of foliage, like my own miserable life. "Come and winter with me in Egypt," he continued. "Come to my yacht, the Flame. We will take her to Alexandria, and then do the Nile in Adabib, and forget that such frivolous dolls as women exist except to be played with by us superior creatures and thrown aside." Egypt, the Nile, I murmured. Somehow the idea pleased me. Yes, why not? Yes, not indeed, he echoed. The proposal is agreeable to you, I am sure. Come and see the land of the old gods, the land where my princess used to live and torture the souls of men. Perhaps we may discover the remains of her last victim. Who knows? I avoided his gaze. The recollection of the horrible winged thing he persisted in imagining to be the transmigrated soul of an evil woman was repugnant to me. Almost I felt as if there were some subtle connection between that hateful creature and my wife Sybil. I was glad when the train reached London, and we, taking a hansom, were plunged into the very vortex of human life. The perpetual noise of traffic, the motley crowds of people, the shouting of newsboys and the omnibus conductors, all this hubbub was grateful to my ears, and for a time at least distracted my thoughts. We lunched at the Savoy, and amused ourselves with noting the town noodles of fashion. The inane young man in the stocks of the stiff high collar, and wearing the manacles of equally stiff and exaggerated cuffs, a veritable prisoner in the dock of silly custom. The frivolous fool of a woman, painted and powdered, with false hair and dyed eyebrows, trying to look as much like a paid courtesan as possible. The elderly matron, skipping forward on high heels, and attempting by the assumption of juvenile airs and graces to cover up and conceal the obtrusive facts of a too obvious paunch and overlapping bosom. The would-be dandy and beau of 70, strangely possessed by youthful desires and manifesting the same goat-like caperings at the heels of young married women. These and such like contemptible units of contemptible social swarm passed before us like puppets at a country fair, and aroused us in turn to laughter or disdain. While we yet lingered over our wine, a man came in alone and sat down at the table next to ours. He had with him a book, which, after giving his orders for luncheon, he at once opened at a marked place and began to read with absorbed attention. I recognized the cover of the volume and knew it to be Mavis Clare's Differences. A haze floated before my sight. A sensation of rising tears was in my throat. I saw the fair face, earnest eyes, and sweet smile of Mavis, that woman wearer of the laurel crown, that keeper of lilies and purity and peace. Alas, those lilies, they were for me des fleurs étranges avec leurs airs déceptifs d'anges, des fraises luminex pour d'idiots de serpents. Les parfums sont trop forts, tout ensemble et trop fins. I shaded my eyes with one hand, yet under that shade I felt that Lucio watched me closely. Presently he spoke softly, just as if he had read my thoughts. Considering the effect a perfectly innocent woman has on the mind of even an evil man, it's strange, isn't it, that there are so few of them? I did not answer. In the present day, he went on, there are a number of females clamoring like unnatural hens in a barnyard about their rights and wrongs. Their greatest rights, their highest privilege, is to guide and guard the souls of men. This they, for the most part, throw away as worthless. Aristocratic women, royal women even, hand over the care of their children to hired attendants and inferiors, and they are surprised and injured if those children turn out to be either fools or blackguards. If I were controller of the state, I would make it the law that every woman should be bound to nurse and guard her children herself, as nature intended, unless prevented by ill health, in which case she would have to get a couple of doctor's certificates to certify the fact. Otherwise, any woman refusing to comply with the law should be sentenced to imprisonment with hard labor. This would bring them to their senses. The idle wickedness, extravagance, and selfishness of women make men the bores and egotists they are.